So first of all, we talked about how we can do some massing um, inside Revit. So we talked about what is the family environment, what is the conceptual massing environment, and what is the Revit environment. So those are basically three new files that you can open. So project, family, or conceptual mass. In all of them, you can do some massing work. And based on which one of them is open and you go to Dynamo, the relationship is defined based on the file that you open. So for now, for the example I want to show, I'm just going to be in a project environment and do an in-place mass. So I have a Revit project open, and I would go to in-place mass and start drawing. So going to a 3D view, showed you guys last time that you can as soon as you put in, you go massing and in-place mass, and then you would start creating your mass. In this example, I'm just drawing a rectangle, getting it from here, and then any 2D shape that you make in the massing environment in Revit, as soon as you select it and say create the form, it will make a 3D object for you. Based on the input you give, it will give you a different output. So in this case, I have only a rectangle on the ground, so Revit's best guess is that I want to extrude it. So as soon as I do that, it will extrude the form. Then it lets me pick different elements, as you know, by pressing tab and going around and move them around and, and get some variations in my form. Some other elements and tools that are available for me in this environment is when I select some of these, I can add profile, which means I can add a new cut here in the middle, or I can add new edges. So I can, like that, go in and add a new edge. I'll just go in and add a new profile, and then again, this profile has different pieces that I can pick and move around and get massing done inside Revit. So based on what you have selected, either it's an edge, either it's a point or a face, it gives you some different elements up there that you can edit that item. I'm going to talk about device surface in a bit, but for now, just know that you can draw things and extrude them, and this is a solid form. If you want to do a void, or you want to cut something out of your geometry, you need to make a void form. In this case, I'm going to draw sphere, and the trick to draw spheres in Revit is to draw a circle, and then when you select it and say, okay, go create my form and pick the void form, it will give you two options down here. Do you want to extrude, or do you want to make a sphere? So that's sometimes when you ask Revit to make a geometry for you, it will give you the options that you have. And then in this case, I pick, hey, I want to do I want to draw the sphere, and then I try to move it somewhere that it's cutting through my object, like that. Then I would pick my cut tool from here. I would select my geometry first, and then I will select the sphere, and then it will cut through. And then when I say finish mass, it will give me this massing that I can, similar to what we were doing before. You can go in and define different elements as walls and as roofs and that kind of thing. I'm just going to scale it up. Or no, I'm going to move this down. It's easier to show you guys another thing that I have not shown you so far. So there's this tool, mass by floor, or mass floors. So when you have a massing that goes through your floor levels, like in this case, you can select that massing, and by this, Revit would generate the floor plates that would happen at those levels for you. And then after this, you can go back and define those floors by faces through here. So that's another thing that's useful to know. But these are left from before. So a few other things that you can do. So you can go and place mass, and you can do you can do a sweep. So for example, if I have a curve here like this, I can now draw my profile that would go and create a loft or a sweep form along this line. it's very important to define the right plane that you draw on in massing in Revit. So I would say set my work plane, and then I would go on one of these points to define a new work plane, for example on this one, and then I would draw something else, let's say that geometry, make sure it's closed, and then now when I go select this and that, and then when I say create my solid form, it will make that loft form for me, or the sweep form for me in Revit. The other thing you can do is to basically do some lofts based on some work planes and on arcs that you can draw in different sequences. So let's say I'm in a floor plan, level 1. I would go under my architecture here in the reference plane. I would pick or draw a few planes that I'm going to use as my working plane later, and I can draw my curves on them and then connect them afterwards to create kind of this surface that I'm looking for. So I'm drawing one plane and copying that forward. Now when I go do my massing mass in place, I can say, okay, set a plane for me, set a work plane for me. I will click on that, it will open this window, and I can say, hey, I want to pick a plane. So I'll click on this, pick a plane, okay. Now I can go pick any of these 3 that I have drawn. So I would go with the first one. Now it says, this plane that you have picked is not visible in this view because it's a top view, you can see it, which view do you want to go to? I would pick the elevation view, I would go there. Now this is my plane. Now I can start drawing things on it. So I would go draw this here, back to my level 1, setting a different work plane, the second one this time, open and view, draw a different curve on it. And then for the third time, going up there, selecting your work plane, pick a plane, click in that, open, and then now the third curve. Okay, now if I go to the 3D view, you can see that I got 3D curves on 3 different planes. You may ask, they're all linear, how can we change them? That's also very easy. You can just select any of these points and move them around based on what you want to get out of this. So now they're not on one plane. They are more diverse. And then now when I select all 3 of these curves and ask Revit to connect them, it will do this kind of form for me. So connects all 3 and gets me a surface. I can shade it so you can see it a little bit more. Okay, now what I was talking about before about how you can select the surface and divide that, this is where I'm going to show you guys an example. So now I've got a surface that is relatively complex. I want to draw a grid on it and maybe define something like a curtain wall that is not as simple as the ones that we had before. It is now well defined, it's more complex. So this is the way to do it through adaptive components. So first of all, I'll go divide the surface, and by default it will give me this kind of pattern. From here, edit type or select type, I can select different types. So in this case, I'm going to go hexagon and get a hexagon pattern for this. And then as you know, through here you can change the properties of what you're dealing with. So I'm going to go say fixed distances, and instead of 2700, change it to 1 meter, and change that from this to also 1 meter. So now I've got smaller hexagons, a pattern on my surface. Now this is a base for an adaptive component to come over. So I will just keep this here, and I will go to my file, new family. Before we have seen that how we can make new families, and this time instead of making a generic one, I want you to look into all these different names. So each of them is a different type of family that you can do, you can create, and it will be applied to a specific place in your project. In this case, I'm looking for a generic model pattern based, because it's a pattern, I'm gonna cover that with a family. But if you look at some other ones, there are some interesting ones that are surface, like last time we were talking about surface-based windows, and they were surface-based families that were made. Or if you go through these, you'll see a lot of interesting ones that will make it possible for you to create a family for a specific use. So in this case, I'm going to go to my pattern-based family, and it will open that. So what you see here is the pattern that is going to apply my family on, and it has 4 points or reference points that will define my unit that I'm using in this pattern. So select my pattern first to change that to hexagon, just to make sure I'm doing what I need to do based on the file that I have open in my in the Revit project. Then I would go draw a line on each of these reference lines that is around my form. So I would just go pick them, standing on one of them, pressing tab to go all the way around. It will now draw a full form around them. So I would say now create a solid form for me. It's extruded, let's say that much. The other thing I want to do is to actually set one of my planes there. Now I want to draw another, maybe a rectangle. Is it red plane? No, it's not the red plane. Let's set the plane one more time. So this is the plane I want to set. Okay, now I want to draw a rectangle. Great. Now I want to go select all the lines there, plus this form to make a sweep that goes around it. So create the form. Now I've got a sweep, and I've got my surface. It's very ugly. I just want to make it a little bit nicer. So select that. The rectangle goes from here to there. This guy can go a bit lower. I can also give this guy a different material. Okay, so selecting all the lines around the form, selecting the profile, creating the form, and then that. I can also, as I said, select these faces and give them different materials, which doesn't matter for now. Then I can pick this and save the file somewhere and give it a name. So I would go save as family. I'm gonna save it on desktop for now and call it the new pattern. And then I can go load that into the project. So load into the project. Now, if I look at my 3D view and if I select this, and under the types, under hexagon, you can see there's a new pattern that I can pick, and that's what I have drawn. And it will apply after a little bit of thinking. So it was a very simple example, but you could do a lot more complex items in each of those components, and based on how this pattern is, it's going a bit crazy, but let's say it doesn't go that crazy. But you can change a lot of different elements on these and apply them over there. The reason it's doing this is not very clear for me, or I would explain that to you. But you should basically be able to apply that grid over this. So instead of defining your surface as a curtain wall, you can just make your components and flow it along the surface just to do whatever you want for you. So that was adaptive components.